So yeah, I was actually looking at an old Bible study we did 2 years ago. It was called "What Happens to Us When We Die," and I wanted to make a part two of it for a couple of weeks now, but I was like, it was such a kind of comprehensive study, very thorough, that I was like, I didn't really know how to really add on it. I thought it was pretty good for what it was, and I was like, maybe talk about from a different perspective. It's not necessarily what happens to us when we die, but there was a psalm that I really like, Psalm 90, and it kind of talks about what we should be doing before we actually do pass away. And so I just wanted to kind of highlight that. This is Psalm 90. This is a prayer of Moses. So, Moses, the prophet, the servant of God, who brought, Israelites out of Egypt in Exodus, spoke to the Most High face to face, a very important man in the scriptures. And he wrote a psalm, or he wrote a prayer, and they put it in the Psalms. And so it talks about God's eternity and man's transitoriness. When it says transitoriness, that's like man's temporary state. Like we live in this state of momentary, um, just life. Like we know we're not going to be here forever. And Moses, he wrote this to give us kind of a perspective on that, because uh, we have to learn that life, it doesn't, this life doesn't last forever. And he gives us a nice insight on what we should be thinking about while we're here. So, verse 1, a prayer of Moses, the man of God. Lord, thou hast been our dwelling place in all generations. Before the mountains were brought forth, or ever thought thou hast formed the earth and the world, even from everlasting to everlasting, thou art God. So God has been there before this world was born, before this earth was made, and he's going to be here even after. He's always been here. He said, verse 3, thou turnest man to destruction and sayest, return ye children of men. And it's like, he has the final say on when we go into the grave. He's like, he brought us into this life, he takes us out of this life, and he brings us, through our, coming and goings. So, verse 4, for 1,000 years in your sight are but as yesterday, when it is past, and as a watch in the night. And so we know about that, like 1,000 years in God's eyes is like a one day, and in His eyes, so it's like 1,000 years is like a day to Him, because time has no limit on Him. He's timeless. He's infinite. He created time, so He doesn't really live in the constraints of time like we do. So 1,000 years is like a day. It's like just a passing day for Him. So thou carriest them away as with the flood. They are as asleep. In the morning they are like grass which grows up. In the morning it flourishes and grows up, and in the evening is cut down and withered. So it's that our life is just like grass that grows. Like it grows one day, Friday it might grow and it looks nice, has some wild flowers, and it's just like it looks nice and green. And then on Sunday, that gets cut down. So it's like that's our life. It grows and it goes down. And that's just the circle of life. It said verse 7, for we are consumed by thine anger, and by thy wrath are we troubled. And so how Moses, he puts it in perspective, like we're not, he doesn't blame anybody else for what happens to his life, or to our failures, or to things that happen in his life. He says all this comes from God. So it's like people like to put the blame on Satan or on demons, or things like that. But it's like everything comes from the Most High. So it's like we're consumed by his anger, his wrath, we're trouble. Because Moses, we know he wasn't allowed to go into the promised land because of a miracle that he tried to take credit for. And so he could have blamed it on the people or something like that. But he said, like, it was because of the Most High's anger with me. So he's like, it's not something that he was really trying to escape the blame from. So he puts everything on the Most High, the good and the bad. And that's kind of how we should always kind of see things. We shouldn't be like, God does good things and this other figure does bad things. It's like everything good and bad, life and darkness, light and darkness comes from the Most High, and we have to see Him like that because when we do that, that allows us to, trust in Him that we're going to get through these dark times because God created the dark times as well as the good times. We shouldn't be fearful to what's to come because if we trust in Him, He's been here from everlasting to everlasting. We should know that He's going to look out for us. And so, verse 8, let me read that again. Verse 7, for we are consumed by thy anger and by thy wrath. We are, or are we troubled? Thou hast set our iniquities before you, our secret sins in the light of your countenance. For all our days are passed away in your wrath. We spend our years as a tale that is told. So it's like, our days is like, someone telling a story. Like, at a funeral, we give the eulogy, or the pastor or someone gives the eulogy. And, that's kind of like the life of us. If we always think about how, if someone gave a eulogy for our life, what would they say? How long would it take them to say it? If someone wrote a book about our life, how long would it take for someone to read it? But that's the temporary life. Like, it could, our life can be summed up in 15, 20, 30 minutes, an hour. We think about documentaries on like great men in the past, great women in the past, like, the Malcolm X documentary and stuff like that. People can read that in one day. Your life can be told, in a couple hours. And it's like, that shows us just the temporary life and just the transientness of our life is very, very short. So with that, what should we do about with this information? So verse 10, it said, the days of our years are 60 years and 10. And a score is 20 years. So when he says three score, that's 3 times 20, that's 60 years and 10. So that's 70 years. So the days of our years are 70 years. And by strength, reason of strength, they be 4 score years or 80 years. So it's like, if you have a decent life, you live up to about 70 years. But if you have more strength, you might get up to the 80s. Live up into your 80s. Some people live up to their 90s or 100. But he's saying in general, most people live up to their 70s or 80s and they pass away. Yet in their strength, labor, and sorrow, for is soon cut off, and we fly away. Who knows the power of thine anger, even according to your fear? So is thy wrath. So teach us to number our days that we may apply our hearts unto wisdom. And so it's like, who knows the anger of the Most High, His wrath, His power is so great that we can't even comprehend His anger. Same way we can't comprehend His love and His mercy. But His power, His anger, His wrath is so powerful because one minute you can be here and then the next minute you can be gone. And we have to, we just have to acknowledge the power that the Most High has. He doesn't really have any constraints on his personality or his abilities. He's limitless. So it's like, who knows how great His power and His wrath can be? Because we read in the scriptures He destroyed the whole world in a flood. So it's like, if He could do that, imagine what He can just do with one person, our life, if we sin against Him. Because He wasn't willing to save the whole world except for 6 people. Imagine us, just one person, in His anger, He can take us out pretty swiftly. And, He'll be justifiable to do it. So it's like, that's why it's like verse 12, it says, so teach us to number our days so we may apply our hearts unto wisdom, because we know we're not going to live forever. So while we're here, may you give us wisdom so that we can, make good decisions while we're here. So keep going. Verse 13. So return, O Yah, how long? And let it repent thee concerning your servants. So Moses asking, how long, we until you come back and, you correct us. Oh, satisfy us early with your mercy, that we may rejoice and be glad all our days. Because we know, we've all sinned, we all made errors and mishaps. So it's like, only reason we get to enjoy, another day is because He allowed us to wake up and, have mercy, to take care of ourselves, take care of our family, enjoy our families. So it's like satisfy us early with mercy, so that we may rejoice and be glad in our days, all our days. Verse 15, make us glad according to the days wherein thou hast afflicted us, in the years where and we have seen evil. And let your work appear unto thy servants, and thy glory unto their children. And let the beauty of Yahuwah our God be upon us, and establish thou the work of our hands upon us. Yea, the works of our hands establish thou it. And so, just these days that we have on this earth, let your beauty, let your glory shine upon it, and shine upon, our children, so that they can, pass on, or we can pass on, the faith, our culture, the things that we view as important. May they, kind of have that impression onto them, that they may carry that on to the next generation, because, you know, we're not going to be here forever. And that's, one of the reasons why we even have children, to perpetuate, the things that we deem important to the next generation, like our culture and the things that, we want, the next generation to have. So we teach our children, and their children teach their children, things like that, so they can continue on this legacy that he started. Especially when he came to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and their progeny. But we try to keep that glory alive in our children, so that the beauty can be seen upon them, so they can taste and see that the Lord is good, and they can enjoy the fruits that come with that. So yeah. So that's why I say that this psalm is very good in regards to how Moses really breaks down just the temporariness of life, and things that we should be considering before we actually reach that age of when we we're going to pass away. Because death is something we all have to, we're all going to experience, whether personally or just, with family or friends. So it's good to have that perspective before we get there, you know, so then we're not shocked, not surprised, we're not bitter, because when you already established that in your heart, you understand the temporariness of life. It stops you from, being upset and bitter. It allows you to forgive, and forgiveness is important, because that allows you to move forward in life. You're not holding on to old things. You're able to become a better person. So it's like, Moses is really, giving us a proper context on how to, just you understand life and the power of God, and that he can do what he wants, and he's justified to do that. And we live under his constraints. We live under his law of order. So while we're under this regulation, we should try to live a wise life, and try to live a happy life, a life of joy, and try to seek peace, because it's not going to last forever while we're here. So it's like, while we're here, we might as well try to have a good life, rather than trying to just live to satisfy our lust